Hi, I'm Matt Finney, and this is the Bad News Network. Trump kicked a hornet's nest of opinions this week when he announced that the 2020 census would have the question, "Are you a citizen?" on it. Naturally, the soapbox champions of illegal aliens and immigration control chimed in with gusto. The reality of this play, though, is that Trump has once again mobilized the American right to his cause. This move bodes well for him politically. Additionally, there is the possibility that the idea of being tracked using this data could scare off that undocumented support that the Democrats have been courting. None of this has any effect on the actual census, though. Changing a document that took 10 years to complete and is even harder to get properly filled out is about as feasible as breathing through a snorkel in space. A Florida school principal named William Latson received a concerned email from a mother who simply had one question to ask. How is the Holocaust being taught at Spanish River High School? His response raised both eyebrows. Latson explained to her that the Holocaust was not taught as a historical fact, as some people didn't believe that the Holocaust actually happened. In the email exchange, Latson actually doubled down by saying that as a public school educator, he needed to remain politically neutral for everybody's rights and beliefs. I know. Now, you might think that this kind of idiocy would Holocaust him his job, but no. Latson has instead been reportedly counseled on some of the Holocaust curriculum changes. For more on the Betsy Ross controversy, we go now to Nick Palmisano in Massachusetts, the 14th biggest state.
Nick Palmisano here, having a nice bottomless Cumbies in Somerset, Massachusetts right now on vacation. Lots to talk about this week, but I want to start with the Betsy Ross flag controversy. As you know, Colin Kaepernick asked Nike to take down some shoes that had the Betsy Ross flag, and a host of people have come out against Nike aggressively, and Nike is the worst, and this is an absurd thing. And I just want to take a moment to explain why the Betsy Ross flag remains an important and powerful symbol to me, and why I think this is blown out of proportion. But I want to do it in a way that doesn't attack people that feel differently, and there's a reason for that. When the Betsy Ross flag was sewn and created, it was done in that way to unite the 13 colonies. This was the first time that these separate colonies, these separate states, were coming together for anything. Prior to that, you can almost think about them as different countries. They had their own laws, they had their own ways of looking at things. They were under British rule, but they were largely allowed to do things however they wanted. We came together against tyranny, and without that step, without that symbol, there is no America. So that was such an important moment in American history. The Betsy Ross flag is so fundamentally American that trying to attach all these negative connotations to it really just takes away from who we are. Nothing goes from 0 to 100 overnight. And if we want to talk specifically about slavery, the Betsy Ross flag was the first time where the abolitionists had any kind of power to even discuss slavery in the southern states. The founding fathers argued back and forth when drafting the Constitution about whether or not slaves should be freed at that moment. There were a lot of people that wanted that to happen. As many people know, the southern states were against that, and without the compromise, there would have been no union. There would be no America. So while we can look at things in 2019 years and say, like, it's pathetic that, the United States was founded allowing slavery, which of course is true, in those days, the fact that this was finally being talked about was huge.
Right you are, Nick. Scintillating. Ross Perot died this week after a 5-month battle with leukemia at the age of 89. Perot had been a Navy veteran, a tech industry pioneer, an independent presidential candidate, a self-made billionaire, a husband, and a father. Throughout the entirety of his career, Ross Perot tried to make this country, and for that matter the world, a better place. He sought to fix things that he saw he could fix. He organized a strike team to rescue 2 employees that were held overseas. He went out of his way to support the military and the American people. He was a man of small stature, but nevertheless commanded great respect, and he'll be remembered well by everyone he encountered. Fair wind, sir. A 7.1 earthquake ruptured the ground in California this week. Homes and businesses rattled, and the earth briefly shook, and the ground opened up on the way out to the Mojave Desert. Scientists are abuzz with fascination at the largest earthquake recorded in 20 years. But more importantly than all that mumbo-jumbo is that droves of tourists are showing up to get that sweet picture for the gram. Now, I've seen plenty of disaster movies to know that this could be that one thing that one scientist was trying to tell everyone before it's too late. So this plays right into the narrative that we should all just ignore that nerd and listen to the hot takes of YouTube celebrities instead of lying awake at night and worrying about natural disasters. This week's hot news has been the Epstein sex trafficking charges, and for that we cut to Nick Palmisano.
Thanks, Matt. So now let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein and everything that's happening there. So I'm going to break this down very simply and start by saying anyone involved, anyone at all, President Trump, President Clinton, I don't care who, my favorite politicians, my favorite sports stars, my favorite actors, whoever you are, if you're actually involved in this, I hope you go down, go to prison, and go to hell. So let's start right there. This guy, who is already a registered sex offender, was found with CD after CD after CD of child pornography in a safe. He's linked to prostitution rings, trafficking rings. I have no idea what the FBI has in terms of evidence. I hope they have enough to make this stick. But a fundamental thing that I want to bring up is whether or not these people were involved in these rings, whether or not these various politicians, Hollywood elites, whoever were involved. I have no friends that are sex traffickers. The second I found out somebody in my circle, and I don't care who it is, I don't care if it's my own brother, is involved in this kind of disgusting nonsense, that person is out of my life, regardless of how much power or money they have. So it's a major issue for me that despite his first run-in with the law, he still has all these major people in power that are still surrounding him. That sends up a lot of red flags for me.
Thanks, Nick. Essentially, the people in power have decided to protect their own transgressions rather than protecting the lives of these kids. And they are kids. When the adults in their lives have manipulated them and essentially groomed them to be pawns in this vile scheme, they never had a chance. There are plenty of laws, loopholes, and backdoor deals that protect the people responsible, forget the people who are harmed, and hinder the people that would exact justice. Even as this high-profile case unfolds, powerful people involved are being protected with immunity. Right now, law enforcement has their sights solely on Epstein, but the problem is much more widespread than that. In order to effectively stop the spread of disease, you can't just treat the affected area. The cancer must be entirely cut out. This case is a slow process, and it's not a blanket victory, but it is a victory nonetheless. The U.S. women's national team won their 4th World Cup title this past weekend, and there was much ado about everything. So here we go, in no particular order. First, the Americans broke the record for the largest scoring margin in a final by beating Thailand 13-0. Of course, there have been cries of poor sportsmanship, but those cries are typically from the losers, and honestly, shut up. It's a soccer competition of the best 2 teams left, designed to determine a winner. And also, it's just soccer. Nobody's in there against the ropes getting their head stoved in unnecessarily because the ref's sitting back going, hey, it's a championship fight. Let him go. Second, Megan Rapinoe has been making headlines after Trump bashing, kneeling for the national anthem, and demanding equal pay between men's and women's sports. Which is a whole lot, but she's definitely not championing the idea of keeping politics out of sports. We all know the story with the kneeling of the national anthem and how those battle lines are drawn. At this point, though, the message is a little murky as everybody's attention is turned to Colin Kaepernick, who's just been capitalizing on it financially. And lastly, the call for equal pay was the hotness after the landslide victory. The women's team and their supporters cited that the men's team on the whole received over $5 million in bonuses, while the women's team received just over $2 million. They stated that the women's team has consistently been #1 and a championship team. And those people aren't wrong. There is a pay gap. Last year, the men's World Cup generated about $6 billion in revenue, of which the teams got around $400 million. That's less than 7% of overall revenue. The 2019 Women's World Cup made somewhere in the region of $131 million, of which the players took home about $30 million. That's more than 20% of the collected revenue. I'm sure there are plenty of battles to be fought and won, but I'm not certain that this is one of them. Equal pay.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
There have been some internet grumblings about the casting for the live-action Little Mermaid lately. But out of all this controversy came a beautiful silver lining. American treasure Terry Crews is campaigning to become the next King Triton in The Little Mermaid. He tweeted a picture of himself photoshopped as the fabled Ariel's dad. The internet flexed its nearly unanimous support for Terry Crews, and we at BNN completely agree. Expectations are high that Disney will acquiesce this abdeptation and that we'll get to see King Terry rep out what is sure to be a maritimeless classic. Poseidon! Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell fielded questions this week regarding the fact that two of his ancestors had once owned slaves. He was also asked whether or not this changed his stance of opposition to the idea of government reparations for the descendants of slaves. McConnell confirmed that he did indeed have ancestors who owned slaves, but that he still opposed reparations. He stated that he didn't think it was a good idea and that nobody responsible was still alive. He went on to point out that America has continually tried to deal with the sins of the past by fighting a civil war and passing landmark civil rights legislation. He did, however, throw his own counter-left by saying that he found himself in the same position as Obama. McConnell stated that we both oppose reparations and we both are the descendants of slave owners. Ancestry.com stocks have skyrocketed. And finally, in Florida news, 35-year-old Barry Lee Hastings Jr. was arrested for impersonating an officer after he tried pulling over an actual deputy. He flashed his yellow and white lights in his black Crown Vic and pulled over the off-duty officer. Rather than write him a ticket, he just told the officer to slow down. When the off-duty officer asked to see his credentials, Hastings says they were back at the office and that the officer was welcome to follow him to the station so that he could show him his credentials. The deputy then told Hastings that he was going to get law enforcement involved and called 911. Hastings then fled the scene but was shortly stopped by an on-duty deputy and was arrested at the scene. And so it seems the shoe is on the other table, which is turned. And with that, I'm Matt Finney and this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and if you're seeing this right now, it's already too late.